someone that I've admired on social media for a couple years. So we'll spend about 45 minutes or so, maybe 50 minutes, could be longer. This guy's got a lot of stuff that's good to say here with Mr. Lonnie Murray. I want to get a couple news items out of the notebook first, including the lack of rain, precipitation impacting businesses in Charlottesville, specifically the Rivanna River Company, who I'm a huge fan of. They've had to shut down, and that's because the Rivanna River is so low right now. So we'll get some chatter out about that. I want to also assess the topic of college athletes who now can utilize or leverage their imaging to secure endorsement deals while playing college sports. It's about time. The NCAA has been exploiting college athletes for so long and just keeping all the money themselves. The fact that college players can now utilize their image rights to make some money, I think is, again, about time. I want to ask you guys this question. Of all the athletes at the University of Virginia, which one has the best potential from an endorsement standpoint? I have a couple of ideas on that. So give the show a like and a share anywhere you are watching. We are live on every social media platform known to mankind. We also archive the show on iloveseville.com. Many of our friends and listeners catch the program on Spotify or iTunes or Apple Podcasts. If you have a question for Lonnie Murray, if you want to give props to Lonnie Murray, or if you want to change the focus and discussion of the show, put your comments, your questions, and your perspective in any of the social feeds, any of the comment sections on social media, and we will relay them on air on the I Love CVille show. We feature the best of Charlottesville, Virginia, and it's not just limited to Charlottesville. Really, it's the best of Central Virginia here on this program. Judah Wickhauer is our fabulous director. Judah, we can start the show when you are ready, sir. Good Thursday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us on today's program. We are live in Charlottesville, in Albemarle County, across Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, and the world on the I Love CVille network. Today's show, just like all of them, truly an interactive and dynamic experience. If you'd like to change the pace and tempo of the conversation, put your comments, your thoughts, your perspective in the comment section. We will relay them on air. As long as they're respectful, I don't mind being challenged. I don't mind being pushed or folks even disagreeing. I think that's healthy discourse and conversation. Just keep them respectful. That's all we ask. This show, guys, powered by Skooma, the new boutique dispensary in the Charlottesville downtown mall. Skooma, the boutique dispensary next to Rapture, opened earlier this month, and they are absolutely doing things the right way, with certificates of authentication and approval with everything sold in the store. That's Skooma Boutique Dispensary. We also thank Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine for being a part of the show. Who's got your back? Dr. Wagner has your back. And crazy fast internet, Ting Fiber Internet, is what keeps us online here on the I Love CVille network. So Lonnie Murray is our guest today. We will welcome him to the program in about 5 minutes or so. Lonnie is a Central Virginia community activist, a stand-up guy, a super bright man, a guy who's got his fingers on the pulse of the community. Also an elected official representing Albemarle County on the Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District. I will stipulate this, and I'm sure he will stipulate this as well. Lonnie today, speaking for Mr. Lonnie Murray only today. We'll welcome him in about 3 minutes now on the show. 2 items I want to get out of the notebook first before we get Mr. Murray on the show. Athletes in college now have the opportunity to profit on their image, their likeness. Basically what that means is a star athlete that has a large following, that is in college sports, can make some money, slap in his or her name or image on a product to help it sell. This is new this year in college sports. Previously in the NCAA, this type of activity got athletes punished, suspended. In the case of Reggie Bush, he had his Heisman Trophy stripped from him. Terrell Pryor, the quarterback at Ohio State back in the day, had to sit out his entire senior season for signing some autographs for profit. Things have changed now. Finally, the man, and the man is the NCAA here, has caught so much heat and fire from the public that they had to change the rules because athletes outside of a scholarship were being exploited by the NCAA, who kept all the profits from college sports. So now that we know kind of what's going on in college sports, that 18 to 22-year-olds can make some money while attending the University of Virginia, while playing basketball, football, tennis, whatever the sport may be, I'm going to ask you this question. Of all the athletes at the University of Virginia, and there are a lot of them, of all the athletes at the University of Virginia, which one do you guys think is best suited for an endorsement deal? Which athlete at the University of Virginia has the best potential to help a business in this community, maybe in Virginia, make some money? I have some ideas. I'm curious of your ideas. Put them in the comments section. Vanessa Parkhill, welcome to the show. NBC 29 and CVille Weekly, hello. My top choice or pick, if I was going to get an athlete at UVA to rep I Love CVille, for example, and maybe say something about the magnet, about the short shirt we have, whatever it may be, I'd probably go Kihei Clark. It's not every day you see a 5'7" basketball player, 5'7", have such an impact in basketball. When you're 5'7" and you're playing basketball, you're approachable. People can relate to you. One of the reasons people love Steph Curry with the Golden State Warriors so much is this guy's not a tall guy. He's not jumping out of the gym. He's just a fantastic shooter with great handles, great dribbler. People can relate to Steph Curry. He's not 6'10", with the 7'3" wingspan and a 40-inch vertical. It's about 6'2", 6'3". We see that walking around town all the time. Kihei Clark kind of embodies that as well. Smaller, 5'7", approachable and likable, great smile, national championship on his resume. Of all the athletes at the University of Virginia, I think you would want to build an advertising campaign around. My pick, Kihei Clark. Let me know what your pick is in the comment section, and the best answer will win an I Love CVille sticker, which we will mail to you ourselves, just like we mailed to JoJo Robertson yesterday. Now, one other item out of the notebook, and then Lonnie Murray on set and on camera and behind a microphone in about 45 seconds, guys. The lack of rain in Central Virginia is impacting businesses. For example, Rivanna River Company on High Street, kind of across from Riverside, next to Cosner Brothers, they've had to shut down tubing and rafting excursions because the water level is so low on the Rivanna. So the question I was wondering this morning is, of the businesses and community endeavors in Central Virginia across Albemarle, when the water gets low because of a lack of rain, which outings get impacted the most? This is actually a good question for Mr. Lonnie Murray, who loves Sugar Hollow quite a bit. So I might start the show with that one. Rivanna River, the piece of news out there is so low that the Rivanna River Company has stopped tubing trips right now. I'm curious of how that's impacting the two Scottsville tubing companies as well. I'm curious how that will impact the golf courses around the area as you see some of the grass turning brown. Give me your thoughts, guys, in the comments section. Now, I'll tell you what, Judah Wickhauer is our fabulous director, and on that note, I'm very proud, very excited to welcome Mr. Lonnie Murray to the set. I mentioned this to you off air. Lonnie, I've been following you on social media for years. I've admired your perspective. I feel fortunate to have you sitting here. I sincerely mean that. Good afternoon, and nice to officially meet you face-to-face as opposed through social media like Facebook. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's nice to meet people in person after this pandemic.
How'd you manage the pandemic?
Well, I have two daughters,
Okay.
both of which were remote schooling, plus I have a full-time job providing IT support. So managing all that home was, it was a challenge at times. But
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate that, unlike a lot of people, I've remained employed. I had reliable internet. So it could have been worse.
Amen. Well said. I appreciate the perspective. How'd your daughters do with digital remote learning?
I think, like many of us, they started off the pandemic strong, and the longer it went on, the more of a challenge it became. I think towards the last couple months of that, it really became much more of a challenge to stay, focused on what they were doing and, keep up with schoolwork and everything. That it's hard to be motivated when you're not there in person with classmates.
Sure, well said. One of Sugar Hollow's biggest evangelists is sitting next to me, and that's you and Lonnie Murray. How is one of my favorite hiking spots and swimming holes doing right now?
I haven't been up there recently.
Okay.
I try to. It's kind of crazy because I live there. A lot of, we try to only go up there when everyone else is not there. So we usually go up on weekdays and so forth. So I haven't been up there recently. I think the big thing for us is, as a neighborhood community member, I support the runners and the cyclists and the people that love Sugar Hollow because we came there because we love it. I wish people would drive a little slower. I wish the county would consider the whole of Sugar Hollow starting at the store. Think of it as a greenway, not as a destination that people race down to the end of. And I can't wait till they do something about the end of Sugar Hollow. I think they need to close the road and build a parking lot, which I think they're planning on doing. I think it's gotten out of control there. I know for emergency, for the EMTs, they've had several serious situations where people getting in accidents up at Blue Hole and difficulty rescuing them. So it's gotten a little crazy up there.
I mean, it's so popular.
It is.
I mean, I've been there sometimes where the parked cars are about a mile long. You get there and you just turn around and go back.
I mean, one of my big pet peeves is someone who really advocates for nature and the environment, particularly when you have places like this that are loved to death almost. It seems like we have lost the ability to know how to appreciate nature respectfully. People are coming out here because they see this is a beautiful place. They love it as we do. But in many ways, they're kind of missing it. They're trampling over, the wildflowers that exist there. They're leaving trash,
Yeah.
Starting fires, doing things that threaten the very beauty of the place that they're visiting. And so that's, and a big challenge for Albemarle has been that they don't even own the property. Charlottesville owns the property.
Oh, let's walk down that.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah, so it is a point of tension, one of the many points of tension between Albemarle and Charlottesville in the sense that they've wanted to take action for years to try and improve the situation at Sugar Hollow and provide for people to sustainably visit and use the place. But since it's so far removed from Charlottesville, really it's up to Charlottesville Parks to do something to manage the situation. And as one would imagine, most of their focus is in Charlottesville. I think action is beginning to happen. Dialogue is beginning to happen between the two parties. And I think once the upgrades on the dam are complete, I think there's going to be some movement on improving situations there. But we'll see.
How do we get to the point where the city of Charlottesville owns something so deep in Albemarle County?
Water.
Let's go down that road.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if you remember, I don't even remember the date myself, but years and years ago when we were under drought restrictions.
I do.
And how painful that was. And it was interesting, the League of Women Voters had this excellent graph before that happened that sort of showed population going this way, quantity of water going that way, and a big X. And here we're going to have a crisis. And then we did. And we ran out of water. It's not something you think could happen in the Piedmont of Virginia, but it is. It's very much something that can happen to us. So that instigated a bunch of changes. the increase of the water supply of Ragged Mountain, some big livid discussions about raising the dam. You go back and look in Seaville and Hook to see those. And then also the decision to get our water from Sugar Hollow. So they actually pipe water from the Sugar Hollow Reservoir, and that's going to be piped into the Ragged Mountain that then supplies water to the city of Charlottesville.
Let me do this. You got props coming in, you got people asking questions already for you. Okay? First, we'll acknowledge some of the people that are watching. Patricia Collier, giving you some props. Charles Garrett, giving you some props here. Folks wanting your take on, interesting, this is something we were going to talk about, on density and expanding the growth area. It's like they follow you on social media or something. This is something he loves to talk about quite a bit. This is something you're passionate about here. Why don't we get the stipulation out first? Because I want to make sure you're protected here.
Yeah. So as you said before, I'm speaking solely as a citizen. I do sit on a number of boards and commissions as well as an elected official, but I am not speaking on behalf of any of those.
Okay, so why don't we open-ended question and then we'll unpack it. State of the Union for Central Virginia and Albemarle County. What's Lonnie Murray's State of the Union here?
State of the Union. I would say we're making great progress. I think things have. I think we've made a number of progress, a lot of progress. I think there's a lot more progress to be made. Some of the areas that I think we're doing well at, I'm very proud that that Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville are taking the stormwater issue very seriously. People don't always realize it, but a drop of water that falls on your rooftop in Charlottesville or Albemarle County eventually ends up in the Chesapeake Bay. And what we do here really matters to whether we can continue to eat oysters or blue crabs. But it also matters to local businesses. Can we have a business that operates on the Rivanna River, for example?
Perfect topic. Look at you,
right.
Broadcasting. That was nicely done there, Lonnie. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, there have been, there's a process of what we call a TMDL, which is one of those fancy acronyms that even if I explained it, doesn't help.
Okay.
It stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. See? Do you understand more now?
Total Maximum Daily Load. You're going to have to explain it a little more.
So what it is that essentially there is a load of pollutants that is in the water that can impair recreation, fishing, and biodiversity of the river, right? And so when a waterway gets a TMDL, then people develop an action plan to help clean up that waterway. And there is a TMDL for the Rivanna River, and there are times in which it's actually not safe to be in the water. The irony is, and you can see the impact of pollutants, because you would think that in times of drought, since there's less water flowing through there, that the water would be dirtier, right? Actually, that's not true. The water is at its most dangerous when there's been a lot of rainfall. Because that's when all the pollutants off the parking lots, off the buildings, pet waste, people's poorly maintained septic systems, that's when all that stuff floods into the river. And so then you can have dangerous levels of bacteria that can enter the waterways. And so those are the exact sort of things that, that I'm very serious about helping to prevent, and to help educate the public about.
So guys, he's making us smarter already. I don't think a lot of folks realize that Sugar Hollow was owned by the city of Charlottesville and not Albemarle County. I did not realize that about water cleanliness. I would have thought that when it was raining more and the water levels were higher, that it was cleaner water than when it was a drought and lower levels. Actually, lower level is cleaner water. So you just informed me on that. I really want to dig into something that people are asking about on the feed, density. So we got Seaville plans together. I'll set the stage. You really know this.
Yeah.
Then I'll get out of your way here. So Seaville plans together. We're going through the process in the city of Charlottesville now, and I'm going to do very layman terminology here. Straightforward terminology is a better description, so everyone understands. We're considering upzoning the city of Charlottesville to create more housing density. And the concept is if we create more housing density, we add housing supply. And if we add more housing supply or stock, that could potentially put pressure on prices, creating more affordability. Because I think we're all in agreement we have an affordability issue in city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County because of a limited stock of housing. We don't have enough rooftops or doors. So I'm going to get out of your way now. You go anywhere you want, and I will adapt to you.
Okay, so let me challenge one of the core assumptions that people make about supply.
Okay?
I don't know if you follow Jim Duncan.
I do.
Yeah, Jim
Ness
Duncan.
Realty.
Yeah, love Jim Duncan.
He's a biker. He's a Crozet fanatic.
Exactly. So I've been following him for years, some things he's had to say about density in the real estate market, and we've had some very interesting conversations. One of the things that's very interesting to follow is to look at Crozet, right? Because since I was a kid, the population of Crozet has expanded exponentially.
Did you grow up in Crozet?
I actually grew up in Ivy.
Okay.
Went to school at Western Albemarle.
Okay.
So very much, local. But I've seen a lot of changes come here. But if you follow this notion that increased supply automatically results in affordability, then you've got to scratch your head over Crozet because we have filled that place up with houses. We joke sometimes when we're going through Old Trail, they're like mushrooms. And some of the houses even now look like mushrooms. And yet that magical price is not coming down.
It's going up.
It's going up.
Yeah.
And why? The other thing is looking at my high school yearbook. I've noticed that Crozet was a lot more diverse in the past. When I look at the number of minority classmates that I used to have when I was in high school or middle school, and now I look at the population of my daughter's schools, there aren't very many minorities left.
Crozet's very white.
It's very white.
Yeah. Right.
And so...
So is Ivy.
Yeah, so
is much of Albemarle County.
Yeah. So I would challenge this notion, and I think really what we need to be talking about is housing type.
Okay.
Not housing supply.
Okay.
One of the big weird things that happens in Charlottesville is that we have a lot of people that migrate to Charlottesville that I would call discretionary buyers.
Okay.
They're people that may be retarees from Northern Virginia or other places where, to them, our housing prices are a steal. We think this is unaffordable. They think this is budget.
Right.
It only takes one of those people to land in a neighborhood and buy one house to expand the assessments of every house in that area.
Well said. That's true.
And so, and also if you're looking at classical supply and demand, you have to realize that the definition of your market matters. If it's a local market, then local supply is what drives the price, right? But if it's a regional market, if you have people from Northern Virginia and other places coming here, it's not a local market, it's a regional market. And so it's really the housing supply of the region, not of the locality, that impacts the housing prices.
Okay, so then I'll ask you this. If it's not about increasing housing stock, it's more, by what you said, about increasing the type of housing. What type of housing should we add?
I do think we need to have more apartments. We need to have more townhouses, more kinds of multifamily housing. I think we have way too much single-family housing in the county. And we definitely have way too many McMansions, farmettes. I think we have no business building those like $500,000, $1 million farmettes in Albemarle County.
But play devil's advocate with you for the sake of a talk show.
Uh-huh.
The market is driving the type of housing that's being created.
Sure it is, but in terms of zoning, we have no obligation to obligate or incentivize that market.
That's true.
And I would say many of our policies locally have the impact of incentivizing some of those housing types. In our rural area, one of the big problems we have are people exploiting the land use valuation tax. So basically, the way it works, people who don't know, is that you can claim that your property is agricultural, and you're supposed to provide documentation to this effect. But there's a lot of abuse of the system.
How so? What's happening here? People are saying they're growing something on there, and then they get agricultural zone and the taxes are lower?
Exactly. So, for example, you have a property up on 29. We have several properties up on 29 worth millions of dollars. And they're only taxed on about $26,000. So basically, they're paying less taxes on their multi-million-dollar property than I pay on my 3 acres with a modest 1980s house, or that someone in Crozet with a townhouse pays. And that's insane.
Okay. What do you say to the people that say, hey, we're just playing the game, and the loopholes are here for allow us to pursue?
I think that is, and that's why it falls on government to fix it. I think that if you have loopholes and they're easy to exploit, people will.
Sure.
I mean,
that's human nature, right?
That's
yeah,
right.
that's human nature.
But if I was a growth area resident and I was looking at my tax bill, and we're talking about affordability, right? So your taxes are part of that affordability piece. I would look at my tax bill and say, well, wait a second. Why am I subsidizing this guy's taxes? I mean, why am I subsidizing his farmette? We discovered, it was brought to my attention that there's a whole neighborhood of a farm estate property in Albemarle County that was getting land use valuation, and they had a neighborhood covenant that expressly forbidded agriculture.
Was it HOA?
I guess it would be an HOA. It was a neighborhood covenant, which I guess would be the same as an HOA.
So the HOA covenant says you cannot call your house agricultural, but all of them were?
Even worse than that, I think that the developer was encouraging people to apply and get land use valuation, while at the same time having a rule that if they had a single chicken, they'd be in violation of their.
So that's straight up fraud.
I'm not going to say.
Okay, I said that. Yeah, that's not straight up. I mean, that sounds like fraud to me. That sounds like. Do we want to name the neighborhood or no?
No, I don't want to name the neighborhood.
That's fair. That's fair.
But there is this magical thing called the Albemarle County Geographical Information System, or GIS.
Yeah.
It's
fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You can surf there all day. I encourage you to surf around there and just look at some of these properties and just see what you see. It's very informative.
We'll acknowledge some of the folks watching here. You got Timothy Winchester giving you some props. Nathan Miller giving you some props. You got folks in Northern Virginia, Short Pump, Williamsburg, Newport News, North Carolina, and Charleston watching the show here. Get back to your Crozet topic. Your Crozet topic, you reference Old Trail. We've added a ton of rooftops in Crozet. And the supply and demand thinking that we learn in Ken Elzinga's economics class at the University of Virginia. Ken Elzinga taught us if you increase supply, that should put price point pressure on stock and potentially lower prices. Your example, which was a perfect one, says, not so fast, my friends, in the words of Lee Corso. And your example was, look at what we did with Old Trail and Crozet. We added rooftops everywhere, and Crozet is more expensive than it's ever been. Is that a direct reflection of the quality of schools there? Is that number one? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that my decision to stay in the county that I grew up in had a lot to do with schools. We looked at houses. We spent a lot of our recreation time in Augusta County, but I would not want to live there
because the schools aren't great.
Because the schools aren't great. And so, I think that does have a factor. And I think, certainly where you place your infrastructure, if it's sort of like build it and they will come, that definitely plays a role in urban planning. Where you put your infrastructure sort of drives where people locate. So I think that has a big piece in Crozet. It's so weird to me because when I grew up, if you were, you told your classmates that you were one of the kids that came from Crozet, they would probably think you were a redneck.
Right.
They would assume that you drove like a
pickup.
Yeah.
Lifted pickup. Yeah. So I've been here since 2000. Yeah. While attending the University of Virginia, I came here to attend the University of Virginia. And I got a job as a stringer, which is a part-time reporter for the Daily Progress. And my beat was high school sports. And at the time, Steve Isaacs was the head football coach at Western. And Steve Isaacs had a fantastic football team. They ran the triple wing. Brian Leskinek was the star player of this football team. And dude, in the early 2000s, even 2005, 2006, I was going out to Western. Just jacked up pickup trucks and good old boys everywhere. Now those jack up pickup trucks and good old boys have been replaced by luxury automobiles and designer brands everywhere.
Yeah. It's kind of it's almost like rural gentrification. It's
rural gentrification. I've never heard that. Go on, Lonnie. Go on, please.
Well, I mean, it was very much a working class. Back when Morton Foods was there was middle class, lower income people that lived in Crozet and went there, worked at Morton Foods. Those were many of my classmates. When they closed,
which was when?
Oh man, don't ask me dates. I don't
like
know.
Rough estimate.
I don't know. It was a long time ago.
Okay.
A long time ago.
Okay.
But when that closed, that's where Star Hill is now. It's in part of that complex of buildings.
Conagra was there, right?
Yeah. Well, that's when it.
That was Morton Foods.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I have old names for places. I always remember. I still call the place my dad worked Sperry.
Okay.
Even though it also changed its name.
Yeah, right. It did. Okay, so the Conagra that we're thinking is Morton Foods.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah. But when Conagra, when they went out of business, I think that had a big impact. And this gets into another issue when we're talking about affordability, right? Because really, it's not just enough to have affordable homes. You have to have places for people to work. You have to have businesses, that ideally, if we're talking about, urban planning, the perfect situation, new urbanism is often exploited and misused. But really the best version of new urbanism is like the downtown mall. That's the best version of it. It's where people can live and work in the same place. What's happened now, I dare say a majority of the people that live in Crozet commute to Charlottesville.
For sure.
And that puts a lot of pressure on infrastructure. But then it also drives, this also sort of drives affordability because if you think about it, if you are lower income, that extra commute, that adds costs to your living.
Not only that, the opportunity cost of losing your most precious commodity, your time, keeping you from potentially vertically climbing the ladder to get a better career. Yeah.
So, I think really to really have true affordability, we also need places for people to work in our growth areas.
Nathan Miller, Morton Foods, 1938 to 1995.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nathan Miller. That's the power of social media right here. You're live on every social platform known to mankind right here. So keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
But so I think that's one of the big things. I think that the decision to upzone Crozet and make it a growth area, that too played a price, ironically, in its lack of affordability. As it became the place to be and highly in demand, that sort of destination, like people say, oh, Crozet, the place to be, that started raising housing prices. Although there's been a lot of controversy about the notion of induced demand, I think if ever there's a place you could say that principle applies, it would be Crozet.
Induced demand?
The idea is essentially that if you, so the thought before was that, well, I'll give you a great example with roads. urban planners have known for a long time that if you add extra lanes to a road or you improve a road because there's a lot of traffic on it, that paradoxically what happens is the traffic increases. The traffic actually gets worse. If you want to reduce traffic on a road,
You make it less convenient.
you make it less convenient.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think that there's a similar thing that can happen with housing that
Make housing less convenient?
well, in the sense that we've done the zoning equivalent of adding extra lanes, of adding a freeway to Crozet. And what that's done is really blow open the market and Crozet and help drive that unaffordability.
Are we not at a critical mass there?
I think what's happening is I think that you're getting a lot of tension. And this too gets to quality of density, but you're getting a lot of tension about the residents of Crozet, particularly some of the old school people that have been there from the beginning, and then also some newer people that came there expecting a certain thing and now it's becoming something else, who are saying, well, wait a second, we were promised this level of density, and now this is becoming too much.
Is that NIMBYism?
I think a little bit of it is. I think a lot of it gets down to the fact that we do a poor job of defining what we mean by density. I think when people see density, they think of 29 North and the mess that's become, and they don't want that to happen.
They're terrified.
They're terrified of that,
Yeah,
and
right.
rightfully so. And so I think we need to do a better job of looking at what we mean by density. I like the idea of what I would call ecological density.
Ecological density. Lonnie Murray
Yeah,
is like
yeah.
blowing my mind right here.
Yeah.
Tell me ecological density.
So typically what we think about in terms of density is we think about a density of sheer people.
Okay?
I think what we need to be thinking about in our growth areas is density of service, not density of people. So that as the number of people go up, we should be expanding the density of service so that, because I think what people imagine in their head is that, and often it is true that as population go up, they see a declining level of service. Their roads become harder to travel. Any open space and green space is destroyed or developed.
Schools?
Schools become worse.
Educational cottages? Trailers?
Yeah. So I think that when people associate density with loss of service, right? And it's not just loss of service in terms of schools and roads and everything. It's also things like declining water quality. It's loss of things like pollinator species and birds and other things that, although we don't necessarily recognize them on a daily basis, we intuitively recognize that those things provide quality of life. When you're in a place like Sugar Hollow and you look around you and you see the trees, you feel that there's something healthy about that place. And what we need to do is rethink the way we do growth areas so that we also have that sense of a healthy growth area, a place that we want to be, not a place that's just an endless sea of concrete. One of the best examples I can say of what I call ecological density is the Dell project at UVA. Here you had a place that was just an empty field with a stream that was buried beneath it. Now, UVA could have put a housing project there. They could have done any number of things with that field, but what they chose to do was very interesting. They daylighted that stream. They pulled it to the surface, and they used that stream to actually filter water. It's designed so that it actually filters water as it goes through on the surface. They planted the whole thing with native plants. They created a lake that was like a recreation area that people, you go there and you go there right now, there's probably people out there recreating around this lake. What they did in that space was create ecological density. They created something that provides a place for people to go, something that's treating stormwater, something that's providing pollinator habitat, urban wildlife habitat, and providing quality of, a quality of place. We need more of that. And I think the more we do that, the more people will want to live in our growth area and not sprawl into our rural areas.
This guy's a smart guy, obviously a very smart guy. Linda Tsai, giving you some props right now. Some questions coming in. We'll get to these questions. Before we do, I want to ask him this. Are we at a point with Crozet where such a critical mass of people living there, throttling infrastructure, potentially, that we could see potentially a diminishing valuation of homes?
I don't think so. I don't think that you're going to see a decrease in the value of homes. I think we really need to, and not just in Crozet, but in our growth area in general, we have way too many single-family homes. It's a waste of our growth area to build, all these new. There's a project that's proposed over near Fontaine. I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong. I think they were proposing something like 75 homes in that area. They're all going to be single-family homes, but it's an area that's like an environmentally sensitive resource. It's part of the Raglan Mountains that Edgar Allan Poe wrote about. Some unusual species that don't occur anywhere else, around Charlottesville are there. And it seems like, why are we putting 75 some homes there, single-family homes, when we could be putting an apartment of 75 units there? If the more we can put into smaller apartments and townhomes, we are conserving green space.
I'll play devil's advocate with you. Apartments in Crozet would likely be housing that caters to workforce, service-oriented jobs. There are not many of those in Crozet. Is it a Kevin Costner, if you build it, they will come, like Field of Dreams?
I think it's a both and. I think we need to build those houses, but we also need to be very proactive about attracting the kinds of businesses to Crozet that people like myself would want to work at.
What's the major employer in Crozet?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Star Hill.
Star Hill.
I could be wrong.
Music Today is no longer there.
Oh, I didn't even think.
Corin's outfit, one of Corin's brands.
Oh,
For those that are watching, what do we think is the top employer in Crozet? Put that in the feed. Nathan Miller, if you're still watching, you got the Morton Foods answer right. What's the top employer at Crozet? Keep going.
But yeah, that's not my area of specialty. But I think we definitely need to think about. I think there's an opportunity, to invite to get tech-based businesses there in Crozet. That's not my specialty, but I definitely think the idea of zoning and encouraging businesses. One of the tools that I really love is called tax incremental financing.
Tax incremental financing, okay?
Yeah, it's kind of a brilliant thing because it's a way of local governments incentivizing the kind of things that they want to happen, and it doesn't really cost them any money. So let's say, let's take Fashion Square Mall as an example, because I really think they should put tax incremental financing apply that there.
Okay. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock, Courthouse, Albemarle, the steps, auction, Fashion Scare Mall. 1 p.m. tomorrow at auction. We'll see if anything happens. I'm going to be on those steps tomorrow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So essentially what it is that any improvements that you make, the locality says that any improvements that you make to that property, they're not going to tax you on for X number of years, right?
So they're incentivizing.
Yeah, they're incentivizing. Now, the brilliant thing about this is they're not losing any tax revenue by doing this, but because in all likelihood, they weren't going to get the kind of development there they wanted anyway, right?
Unless they offered a break.
Unless they offered a break, right? So by offering the break, you're helping encourage the kind of development that will be there. It doesn't cost you, it doesn't affect your current bottom line at all. But what it does do is help spur redevelopment.
When the jurisdiction makes that offer, it's called innovative. When the developer asks for the tax breaks, is it called extortion? John Dewberry Hotel.
I won't go there.
Okay, that's fair. That's completely fair.
I will say, though, that what I would love to see happen with the Fashion Square Mall property is I think it'd be a great place to retrofit housing in there. I think I hate parking lots. One of the things my Facebook friend, Matthew Gillikin.
He watches this show, listens.
I totally agree. We have no business encouraging people to build more surface parking in the area. I think It's crazy indeed that we have minimum parking requirements. I mean, if you build a business in Albemarle County, you should know how much parking you need. We shouldn't tell you, well, we hear how much parking you think you need, but you should build more. All that surface parking, the rain hits that parking, it serves as impervious surface, washes all those pollutants into the stream, ends up in the Rivanna River. Why? Why are we doing that? Plus, all that empty parking could be housing, could be more businesses, could be green space, could be so many other things. And even when Fashion Square Mall was doing well, most of that lot was empty. That's a horrible waste of space, particularly in a growth area where you have limited space. Let's incentivize converting that into something else.
So the growth area of Albemarle County is roughly 5% of Albemarle County in totality. And of that 5%, it's commercial and residential, and not all that 5% can even be developed because of the topography of the land. Some of it's not welcoming or conducive to development. Nathan Miller answers the University of Virginia is the top employer in Charlottesville and also Crozet.
Oh,
Nathan Miller,
makes
thank
sense.
you for that knowledge right there, Nathan Miller. I'm going to throw this to you here. If we only have 5% of Albemarle County that can be developed, should we expand that 5% now, or do we maximize that 5% before we expand the 5%? Because we're not at full capacity at that 5% yet.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. So I'll tell you what I think, but I'd also like to hear what you think.
Sure.
What I think, for years, I pushed some of my developer friends, say, listen, why don't you put a parking garage instead of big surface parking lot in this development? And they say, oh, well, we're not at the point in density in our area where we can do things like parking garages. It's just the numbers don't work out. And I say, well, why don't you put apartments instead of single-family houses? Well, we haven't reached that density yet. So it's interesting in Charlottesville. Charlottesville always, they used to really refer to themselves as landlocked. This is a bad thing. We don't have a lot of green fields, so we're trapped. And that was one of the big things behind annexation of Albemarle County and why they thought it was necessary to steal parts of Albemarle County.
We're going to the revenue sharing agreement here.
I'll go back to that because
Okay.
I have opinions. But really, being landlocked was the best thing that could have happened to Charlottesville.
How so?
Because with less land to work with, they started to develop smarter. Now, you finally start to see underground parking garages. You start to see people building parking structures, not big surface lots. You start seeing people building apartments, not single-family housing. And
Still, 53% of Charlottesville City is R1 single family. Over half of residential.
And if Charlottesville can continue to expand exponentially, it'd be even more.
That's true. Good counterpoint right there.
So I think you don't get quality density until you have constraints. When people realize that land is a limited commodity. And so with Albemarle County, I think developers have been extremely wasteful. You have places like Forest Lakes that cover enormous amount of property, but you could have done more with that. I mean, you could have had, even if you kept the number of people the same, you could have more green space in smaller areas. You could have had a much nicer growth area, but we squandered it. We just covered it all with lawns, and so I will deviate a little bit, I guess, about lawns. Lawns are the single biggest crop in the United States.
Lawns, like a front yard.
There are more acres in turf grass than any crop in the United States.
Okay.
And so the thing about lawns is that they don't do anything for us. They're
Well, then let your daughters have a place to play.
They do, but there are other ways to do that. And it's hard to, it's also hard to see for some of these rural area properties with 20-acre lawns that really they're playing on that 20 acres, right? But oftentimes they are pollutants in themselves. People cover them with fertilizer and pesticides. One of the the way that we develop subdivisions is extraordinarily destructive. One of my great examples, can you tell me the only place in the world that Venus flytraps live?
No.
The only place that Venus flytraps are native to in the world is 100 miles around Wilmington, North Carolina.
100 miles from Wilmington, North Carolina?
100 miles from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Okay.
And they're quite endangered in the wild. And the biggest thing that's wiping them out is suburban development, of suburban sprawl, golf courses and subdivisions.
So why the analogy to the Venus flytrap?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
So one of the best habitats for Venus flytraps is actually a military bombing range.
A military bombing range?
Correct. So here's the thing. You can bomb the heck out of a place for decades and do less damage to the ecology than we do when we build homes.
Lord, that's great. I love this.
So the development process, what happens, they come in, they cut down all the trees, they remove the stumps, they remove the topsoil, often selling it off. They grade the whole place flat down to subsoil. They come in, they put the houses in there, they plant non-native grasses. Your lawn grass is not a native plant in Virginia, which is why it's not happy in the summertime. And then if anything survives this onslaught, if a native plant happens to come from our lawn, we hit it with herbicide. If suddenly we see ants or something, we go get some pesticide to kill the ants. If anything has survived this onslaught, we release our pets to kill the rest of it. So we're massively sterilizing our landscape, and that's a huge problem. And it doesn't have to be. We don't have to develop that way. That's not necessary.
So what do we do here? We have Linda. Thank you for sharing the show. You got three media outlets watching you here as well, Lonnie. We got Charlottesville and Albemarle County have turned into a Zoom town. And the definition of the Zoom town, as you know, is being able to work remotely from an ISP at your house. And we have folks, families from the eastern seaboard, densely populated areas, expensive areas. You referenced this already earlier in this interview. DC, Philly, Northern Virginia, New York City. They're selling their 1,000 square foot apartment, 1,200 square foot townhome for major bucks and coming down here with a sack of money. And they're buying our limited housing stock, and they're saying, rubbing their hands together, saying, good God, we got a deal. Because the delta is maybe 50,000, 100,000, six figures in the bank that they were able to bank in these transactions. And now they're working in their basement, their home office, while earning their big city paycheck and saying, this is a cheap place to live. I've been here 20 years, 21 years in August. You've been here all your life. I don't think this is a cheap place to live. I think this place is extremely expensive to live. Maybe because I'm earning an I Love CVille paycheck and not a Deloitte paycheck from a DC firm.
I couldn't afford to. I see the prices of things in Old Trail, and my jaw drops.
And it's a postage stamp of a lot.
It's a postage stamp of a lot, and it's.
And we're not knocking Old Trail.
I know it's not.
Yeah.
I love Old Trail. We particularly we go there to the Mexican restaurant all the time. I do like how they've incorporated green space into their development. They're actually an example of someone who's doing some things right. But yeah.
So the question I have for you is, how are we going to create affordability if only 5% of the county is situated for residential and commercial development? Residential and commercial, not just residential. It seems to me, and I'm going to preface what I'm about to say here. It seems to me we need to add more rooftops, but we mustn't prioritize infrastructure at the same time we're adding rooftops. A microcosm of this is what could have happened at Mountain View Elementary. Mountain View, formerly Cale, because of increased density in the south side of Albemarle County, south side Charlottesville area, they almost eradicated the 5th grade from elementary school and said, 5th graders, you're going to have to go to middle school because we have too much density in our elementary school. And then the parents, the PTO, organized, galvanized, raised a ruckus, and were able to keep the 5th grade in elementary school. But if I was a parent of a 5th grader, and my kid had to spend an extra 90 minutes to 2 hours in a bus and had to go to a middle school with 8th graders where my little boy could have been bullied, learning stuff that fast, you get it, you're a parent too.
Yeah.
They didn't even have playgrounds for 5th graders at the middle school. I would have been upset by that. I'm sure you would have been upset by that. Your show, where you want to go with that topic?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, first how we pay for stuff, right? So people think that residential development pays for things. It doesn't.
You're talking real estate taxes?
Yeah, so the way it works is that particularly suburban sprawl actually costs the county money. It's a net loss. What actually gets you revenue as a locality is commercial development. So commercial development is revenue positive, and residential development is, by and large, revenue negative.
Because of the tax on the infrastructure around said residential development?
Because the services that are required by the people that live in the houses tends to be, the cost of those services for the new residents costs more
Then the real estate tax is generated.
than yeah.
And commercial is not the opposite. Is the opposite because?
And the commercial is the opposite because it's pure revenue. And the services that you're providing to support that are far less than what you're gaining return in terms of revenue. So if you really want, better schools and, more parks and everything, the irony is you really need to have, quality commercial development within your growth area. And this is one area where I think that some localities have, we've heard about a lot of the localities near us, like Fluvanna and Louisa and Augusta County, who've just thrown the gates open, like, all right, well, you can build your house here.
And they're booming.
They're booming, but they're starting to feel the pain too, because if you look at how much taxes have increased in Fluvanna County, it's pretty crazy. And part of that is all these new residents, they're starting to realize, well, wait a second, all right, we moved here, but now we have kids and the schools are terrible. Or the schools are overcrowded, or like there's no bike lanes, there's no, any of the things that they want in that county are not there because there's no tax revenue. And when you have tons and tons of houses and not enough businesses, it can create a very dire economic situation for your locality.
So is your theory then we should prioritize more commercial development?
I definitely think we should prioritize commercial development. I think, but I want to go back to another thing too, which is I think we need to look at, you mentioned the growth area. When we look at this pattern of suburban sprawl, one of the reasons that you want compact growth costs way less in terms of providing services to that compact growth
Sure.
than does suburban sprawl. So the more compact the growth can be, the less that housing costs us, and less it costs us in terms of taxes and the ability to support it. If we go ahead and expand the growth area now, we won't get compact growth. We'll get a lot more single-family housing. And it'll likely be very expensive, single-family housing.
Well, okay, I'll play devil's advocate with you. I'm going to get to these comments. So in fact, let me get to the comments here because a lot of them are coming in. Nicholas Erpy, watching the program. Nicholas, CMO, Emergent Financial Services. Nicholas Erpy. Does the proximity of the businesses have to do anything with the demand to be in Crozet? For example, 150 Fun, it's talking 151, 150 Fun, vineyards and breweries, which are such a draw for people of all ages right now, may be driving the popularity in Crozet.
That's an interesting idea. I know that we often enjoy the 151 corridor.
Your family?
Yeah. I mean, we do a lot of hiking and outdoor things, and but it's nice to stop at a restaurant, here, going there on the way
get a cold
back.
beer or a cider or a wine.
Absolutely.
Isn't it a beautiful time when we can take our kids to the brewery and have a couple cold beers and they can run around? I mean, 50 years ago, if we were taking our kids to the bars, it would be a major issue. Now we call them breweries and it's fine.
Yeah.
We do it all the time too, my wife and I, and our kid.
While there are some things, an example of something right in Nelson County, speaking of ecological density, Devil's Backbone. Next time you visit Devil's Backbone, pay close attention to the landscaping because almost all of those plants are all plants native to Virginia. So they've done almost completely native landscaping. It's a great, you can sit there with your family and you can see, butterflies and pollinators. It's absolutely stunning. And there's no excuse why that can't be the standard for everything. Why aren't we doing more of that?
Well, Devil's Backbone has that Anheuser-Busch InBev money
Well,
behind it. I mean, that helps.
I'm sure it helps.
Yeah, that helps
I'm sure
a
it
lot.
helps.
I mean, you got a global powerhouse here. How about this one? And Nathan, you've really contributed to today's show. He says, I agree with Lonnie. We need a balance between growth and ecological sustainability. Rare plants such as Torrey's mountain mint and animals such as the spotted salamander live in the Charlottesville area. I live in Rockingham County and commute to PVCC to teach every week to teach students about the natural world around us. I cannot afford to live in Albemarle and Augusta counties. You want to handle that? You want to touch that at all?
Yeah, I mean, Nate is absolutely right. I think, and there's great examples of developers doing things the right way.
For example?
Up on 29 North, we have the example of an area where salamanders once a year would migrate from one side of the road to the other side of the road, and they're being hit by a Polo Grounds road. And there's these vernal pools they live in, these temporary ponds, and they need these to breed. And for years, volunteers, local naturalists were hand carrying these salamanders from one side of the road to the other.
Really?
Yeah, so they wouldn't get hit by cars. And they're really beautiful. I mean, they're large, really beautiful salamanders. And I and my daughter even went out there one time to do this. And you can't do this and not fall in love with these guys. And so a developer was going to develop one of the properties where these salamanders live. And, a lot of the people that follow this issue were like, oh man, this is the end. This is the end, the additional traffic, the loss of trees and green space, they're toast. But we said, but you know what? Let's reach out to the developer. Let's say.
Can I ask who the developer was?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's escapes my mind right now.
Okay.
It's probably a quick Google.
Okay. You're a smart guy, man. You know a lot about a lot of stuff.
I depend on Google to remember it. Google is my memory. It's probably
Okay.
why I'm losing my ability to remember basic things because I Google everything. I'm like, who is that guy? Yeah. So what was really interesting is, we reached out to the developer and said, hey, listen, could you do something here? Like if someone could just build some tunnels under the road so the salamanders could travel under the road, then, and if you just provide a little bit of green space for these guys to live in, then this could be a win-win for everyone. And the developers ran with it. When he brought his proposal before the Board of Supervisors, they even had little buttons made up, like save our salamanders.
That's awesome.
And so it sailed through the development process. Through the approval process, because there's a lot of citizen opposition, as there often is, but because the developer was saying, hey, look, we have a comp plan goal for biodiversity. Biodiversity is something this county cares about. I can do something good, and maybe out of the goodness of my heart, but maybe also because it's excellent publicity. I don't know.
Well, in my business, this is an advertising business. In my business, that's called humanizing, localizing, and personalizing. He put a local mission behind the development, and whether that seduces or distracts or romanticizes the public to supporting the project.
Yeah, and so he offered to build the tunnels. The tunnels are built. First year, we had naturalists go out there, and the salamanders are using the tunnels.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they've even. I was delighted to see one of the streets and the development is called Salamander Street.
Salamander Street was one of the streets in the development? That is awesome.
Yeah, so to me, that's an example of how, one of the examples of how to do things right. How to, build our community sustainably. And nothing drives me more insane than, driving through a new subdivision and seeing streets like Spruce Street, we don't have native spruce in Albemarle County, or these stupid developer anywhere America names for things. I don't even know. I'd love to hear sometime where those names come from. Do they have like a randomized database? Like they click a button, it spits out a random name?
It's probably something like that. Or one of my friends is a developer, and he says, we're good at building houses, but you ask us to name some streets, and that's going to be the hardest thing about the project. So that's probably where they come up with like Maple Street, Spruce Street, like you said. And Parrish Utz is watching. I love this salamander story. I did not know about the landscaping at Devil's Backbone either, but I love seeing kids at breweries. And thank you for watching the show. This is an interesting question and topic that's come in. This is from Thomas. Thomas Lavish? I think it's Lavish. Thomas says, if you expand the growth area in Albemarle County, developers are just going to build by right because it's the quickest road to profitability, and we'll just see more McMansions built in Albemarle.
Oh, if we don't?
If we do.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if we do. That's right. I think, and I think the by right development issue is a big problem, and it's one of the things that impacts even the quality of our growth areas, because sometimes when developers don't like the conditions or it's too expensive to go by the rules, then they just say, well, fine, we'll just develop by right. And then they usually do it at lower density, the houses are less affordable, and everyone loses. Or at least we lose in terms of housing affordability, we lose in terms of the quality of the development. I'm a really big fan of something called form-based code.
Okay, let's go down that road.
One of the problems with how we do development is that the input process is all wrong. We do the input process at the very end. The public weighs in after staff and the developer have been working on things for months, sometimes years, to try and get the details right. At that point, projects have a lot of inertia. If you do stop it, it's going to be really expensive for the developer. If you make changes, they're really expensive. And then it's hard for the community to make any kind of significant input to the project that matters, right? That you're going to do at the level of the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. The nice thing about form-based code is you decide the form that you want. Like you decide what do we want development to look like in the area. Decide that up front. Get the community involved in that process, because that's what matters. And then when we get to the end of the process, have that be an administrative approval, not a big public meeting. This takes the process and flips it, puts the public input on the front. In my opinion, this saves developers money because they don't have to go through a lengthy approval process, only be turned down in the end, or have things changed radically. But the community wins because the developer is very incentivized to follow the form. Like to say, wow, here's what the community wants, let's build this. And so that's what I would like to see. I'd like to really see us do more in terms of form-based code.
One of the things I've learned while doing this show, especially when it comes to housing costs, 24% of a cost of home in Albemarle County is tied to paperwork and red tape associated with the municipality. So guys, if a home is priced, let's just use easy numbers, at $400K, roughly $100,000 of that cost of that $400,000 home is not lumber, it's not windows, it's not appliances, it's not granite, it's not flooring. It's the builder having to go through red tape, licenses, paperwork, certifications, approvals with the jurisdiction.
Yeah, one idea that I and some friends had years ago, back when I was, anyway, some years ago, some friends and I had this idea that we do things, kind of like we do in schools. Like we give each development project a grade, A through F, right? And we decide like what you need to do to get an A. Like you need to do things like sidewalks, bike lanes, green space, manage stormwater effectively, go above and beyond to get your A, right? You get an A, you're administratively approved, you don't need to do anything else, you're done. The only thing that's involved is staff verifying you did what you say you're going to do, right? If you get a C, then it's like, all right, we're going to have a discussion about this. Like you might have to have a public hearing so we can discuss the details of it, well, whether this is really necessary, because we're not sure. You get an F, it's automatically denied. You don't get to bring it back. You need to submit all from the beginning. So I would love to see a system like that, because what would happen would be is that people would be, first of all, the grade would be public, right? So if you build your subdivision, you're going to want to be able to say that my subdivision got a grade A, right? I'm a grade A subdivision. You don't want to be the grade C plus.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And people would be really strongly disincentivized from getting an F. Like you would not want to get it, because the cost of doing that would be, you would do everything in your power to avoid going there. So we'd get a higher quality of development, but the cost of development would also go way down, because people would automatically, know what to expect. And you wouldn't have a long regulatory process. I won't name them out loud, but one of my developer friends, I asked him one time, we were talking about like stream buffers and better protection of water resources, and he said, and I said, is this going to be undue burden on, and he says, I don't care. I said, it doesn't, the regulations actually don't matter to me what the regulations are. I just need them to be consistent. Like I don't need, if you change them at the last minute on me so that I have to do, jump through a bunch of different hoops or redesign everything, that's what kills me. It's not the regulations. You tell us, you need a buffer of this width and you need to, we need to have green roofs or whatever. All right, we do that. And then it's done. But if you change it and keep like shifting the bar, make us go to a lot of different meetings and then change your mind, that's what makes things unaffordable.
Anne says she's watching the show with her patients, and she's trying to make the show a daily thing for them. Thank you, Anne. Johnny Ornelas, owner of El Mariachi in Guadalajara, is watching. He says, just like the farm use plates, which was in response to the Farmette agricultural commentary that we were talking about earlier in the interview. Questions are coming in on Twitter, which I will get to in a matter of moments. Good night. We are 75 minutes into our interview. That's a testament to you being very dynamic, and frankly, very much enjoyed this kind of topic and conversation. Why don't we do this? Can I give you some quick hitters and get your take on stuff?
Yeah.
Biscuit Run Park. We got 1,000 acres in the urban ring doing nothing for Albemarle County, and certainly not improving the quality of life of us that live in Central Virginia. To put Biscuit Run Park in perspective, if you combine Pretty Creek and Walnut Creek parks, those two, Biscuit Run Park is still larger than the combined version of Pretty and Walnut Creek. What do we do with Biscuit Run Park?
Well, so as you may know, I was on the advisory committee for that. Obviously, I'm not speaking for the advisory committee, but what I really wanted to do is I wish that they had put some little tiny cabins there. I think that's one thing that's really missing. If you look at any of the state parks, cabins they're rented out months and months in advance. It's hard to get them. And
so Albemarle County would own the cabins and manage them?
Yeah, well, or we could...
Public-private partnership?
Public-private partnership. There's the donut hole, if we could convince the Breeden family maybe to do cabins. I would love to see something like that personally. I think that the idea of being able to stay in a cabin and then have access to a biking, running, cycling network that spans the area would be fantastic.
That's a great idea.
A major tourist draw. And because I think you look at the number of runners and cyclists, you think about just a single race, like the Charlottesville 10 miler or the Charlottesville Marathon, the number of people that come into the area.
Big time.
It's a huge economic impact. They stay at a hotel or go out to restaurants. And best of all, they're not using our schools. They're not using,
they're not taxing our infrastructure.
They're not taxing our infrastructure.
Yeah.
So
that's a great idea. That is a great idea. I might take that idea from you. I will always give you credit for that idea. That is a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
What is keeping that idea from coming to fruition? That is a great idea.
Yeah.
The cabins at Biscuit Run Park is a great idea.
I think it's a great idea too. And I think, and there are ways to do it. I mean, you don't have to have, for me, I like the old Civilian Conservation Corps style cabins. I love those things. But now you go to like the newer state parks and they're not what I would call cabins. They're definitely, Abraham Lincoln would not recognize them. They're
Right. Yeah.
What I call chateaus maybe. I don't know. We don't need that. We need something, with some cots.
You're talking minimalist.
Minimalist, yeah. And something that someone could go stay at, and then hop on their mountain bike, and then travel, maybe ride up to Monticello from their cabin. Maybe bike to Walnut Creek Park. Bike into Charlottesville, have dinner. I mean, that's what I'd love to see.
And that's incremental tax revenue for the county.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a great idea. What is keeping that idea from becoming a reality? Why is the park doing nothing? Why are we not using the park?
Well, I think there's some things they're waiting on. They're trying to get a dedicated greenway access between Charlottesville and Biscuit Run. And, what you might want to do is see if you can get someone from...
I talked to Peter Krebs of Piedmont Environmental Council about this.
Yeah. I mean, I think getting that connection is really important. So, and then I think also, there's this thing, I think we need to, I'm okay as a county resident paying more taxes if it goes to things like green space. If I need to pay like a couple cents more taxes so that we can complete Biscuit Run Park, by means, tell me the place I can send my check. I'm for it. I think we need to really make the case to the public that paying for, getting this done is worth it. And
I agree.
Getting it done right.
Well, especially since it's in the urban ring.
Yeah, especially since it's the urban ring.
It's supposed to be.
And right now it's kind of, I mean, right now there's problems because it's sort of in no man's land, right? There are people that are using the park right now.
Oh yeah, sneaking onto mountain bike.
Yeah, and there are people building, out there doing illegal trail construction.
Right, that's true.
And that's a problem for natural resources too. There are rare plants and rare natural communities in the park, and we don't want an unsanctioned trail going through those areas that we're going to have to deal with later. So that's the problem, and it ends up giving, it ends up giving a bad name, to people like
to mountain bikers.
Mountain bikers, right?
And not all of them fit that moniker.
Yeah.
But there are some cowboys out there that are just carving their own trails through parks that aren't. I mean, Biscuit Run is not even open.
But in the larger sense, beyond just Biscuit Run, I think we do a poor job supporting running and cycling and walking.
Let's get your take on that.
If you look at the cost and difficulty of establishing this trail to Biscuit Run, right? Then you compare that, the cost of any of the trails that have been built in Charlottesville, like what it's cost to build those. But then you look at a place like Ridge Road that runners have used for years and years, and have miles and miles of trail that people this is what I call a natural greenway, and we don't have enough acknowledgement of our natural greenways that occur. Sugar Hollow is a natural greenway, that gets lots of biking and cycling. Now, if we had to construct a new greenway of similar length, it'd be prohibitively expensive. But we do a poor job of protecting some of these areas that are natural greenways. When you look at there's a paving priority list for the county. And when you look at the list of roads to be paved, a lot of those same roads are also on the list of the best places to run on the Raglan Mountain website. So there's this lack of acknowledgement that, there's these other users of the road, and if we pave these places, they're gone. I remember back before Sugar Hollow was paved, and it was way safer to run there. There's parts of Sugar Hollow Road I don't run on anymore, like the twisty hill part, because
it's a little dangerous when cars are flying around the turns. Sure.
There are other roads that have been paved and now you can't use them. I've seen circumstances where people have had their roads paved, and now they've had to put up billboards like saying, please slow down, because no one enforces traffic speed limits on rural roads. When a lot of these roads are paved, the VDOT will do a traffic study and count the number of cars that use the road, but what VDOT is not doing is counting the number of cyclists and bikers in those areas. And so I think we have both a rural and an urban strategy for thinking about greenways. We need to acknowledge that these natural greenways exist in rural areas. We need to quantify them. There's great apps out there that can even give you heat maps of where they are. Strava, you can go out there and see heat maps. It's really fascinating to see where people are biking and running. And we need to consider those things in planning decisions. Currently, our planning says that the infrastructure should go in the growth areas, not in our rural areas, but road paving is infrastructure. And it's contrary to our concept of, to our whole growth management strategy. If we're taking an area that was covered with farms and then we pave that, I guarantee you, couple of years, it's all going to be subdivisions, and they're going to be very expensive subdivisions of like 20-acre like McMansion subdivisions.
What's your take on broadband equity?
As a parent who's had 2 kids, in teleschool, I think it's important.
It shocks me how few households in Albemarle County have broadband, especially with the level of affluence in Albemarle.
Yeah, I mean, it is surprising. We were in Batesville before we moved to Sugar Hollow.
You didn't have it there, right?
My internet was literally a hotspot from my cell phone.
And now?
Well, the story.
What's up and down speed now for you?
I couldn't tell you the exact number.
Is it legit though?
Oh, it's good. We're on fiber now.
Oh, you're on fiber?
We're on fiber.
Get out.
So
which fiber?
CenturyLink.
You're on CenturyLink?
So the way that it was done, and I'm probably going to get this wrong. I'm sure someone's going to be like, that's not what happened. So I'm just going to give you the anecdotal story. So when I was in Batesville, we had a friend of mine, Aaron, set up this thing called Nextdoor for us. And so we used that as our started this social media platform for neighborhoods that we were using. Yeah, it's great. But then when I moved over to Sugar Hollow, there wasn't Nextdoor, and I was like, so what do I do? Like, I can't, I have this account that's not good for anything because there's not a neighborhood. So I just drew a circle on the map and created a neighborhood, and that became Nextdoor for Sugar Hollow. Immediately, the first topic that came up was high-speed internet on Nextdoor. And people were like, yeah, we need to do something. And then we say, well, we know Ann Malik, maybe we should.
She's your rep?
She's our board supervisor rep. And she said, so what can we do? Let's talk to Ann. And so Ann's like, well, I know the CenturyLink guy. Let's get him in a room. And so we got him in a room. We got all the neighbors together, and we're basically like saying, why can't you? Like, we're hammering on him for quite a while, and I think like an hour into this whole thing, or more, the guy says, well, if someone, wink, wink, had a business in Sugar Hollow and applied for a business service, internet connection, we would have to provide it for them.
And then you could utilize that for the residents.
And there would be nothing stopping the rest of us from
piggybacking.
Yeah, so basically we all did like a fundraising campaign. Like, we had the one business to respond to this, and we had everyone else in the community kind of donate money to the cause.
Was it a lot?
It was a lot.
Like, what's ballpark?
Yeah, you're asking me numbers again, which I can't
This
remember.
is to put the lack of better phrase, the infrastructure underground?
Yeah, to actually do the cable from, and it was from from the Piedmont store, out into down Sugar Hollow.
So that's significant money.
It was significant.
You
So it was,
crowdsourced that for the business?
we did.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I didn't personally. Actually, the business really is in it, Sugar Hollow, that really drove this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's how you guys got fiber in Sugar Hollow?
That's how we got fiber in Sugar
That is a
Hollow.
wonderful story. That's like community rallying together.
Yeah.
Now can you imagine if you didn't have that with your daughters learning from home?
Yeah, I mean, when we were...
They'd be driving to hotspots like in Orange County to download the stuff on a tablet.
Probably would have been sitting out in the Crozet Library parking lot or
Right.
something. I'm not sure what we would have done. But yeah, it was kind of when we fought, when this was all sort of, when community leaders were sort of fighting for this, internet was still, it was still pretty much a luxury. Like,
Right.
so we could watch Netflix at night or something. But once
COVID hit, it became a utility.
it became a utility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are a smart dude here. We're at 2 o'clock right now. I'm mindful of your time. I'm mindful of his time too, Judah's time. Other topics that need to be in the news cycle that we haven't hit. This has been a pretty thorough, you could speak about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so let's see. Do you have other questions for me about topics that
I do. Should we get to those?
Yeah.
Let's see here. So, ask Lonnie's take on what could drive jobs to the Crozet or Western Albemarle portion of the county, because it seems like until we get the jobs, we're not going to get the housing. And that's from Brian Lancaster.
It's a great question. I think the county definitely needs to use whatever economic incentives it can bring to bear on that.
You're talking recruiting outside firms to Western Albemarle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we do have industrial buildings that aren't being used. We have, and really whether it's the Crozet or it's with the growth area anyway, we have these large underutilized or poorly utilized spaces. And I think it needs to be a big priority of the county to incentivize redevelopment of those spaces, and particularly in ways that bring in jobs. I think a lot of economic departments do a lot of outreach to try and attract companies to areas. I will say that one of the things, if you are Google, or if you are, if you're
Amazon,
when they look for places to put their corporate headquarters, it's interesting what some of the things they're looking for, and they're not necessarily intuitive. They're actually looking for places that have quality green space.
Yeah, a perfect example of this was Deschutes Brewery trying to open up a brewery at the 29 South area, and local government kiboshed that. But one of the reasons Deschutes, who's from Bend, Oregon, was trying to open up in that Route 29 South corridor was because of the fantastic green space, the quality of life, and how Albemarle County reminded them of Bend. And they thought that would be good for their team members who embodied this green space outside, get on a bike, go swimming, hiking type of mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, having quality green space that's accessible, I think a good exercise that county and city officials should do once a year is, I think we should drop 2 points randomly on a map, a mile apart, and have them walk from one to the other. And just to see how difficult that is. Because I think, even in Charlottesville, there's just roads just suddenly end. I mean, like sidewalks just end suddenly, and you can't, then you have to walk into traffic. That's a big problem. There's still, areas in Crozet. I've communicated with people that would really like sidewalks extended to their neighborhoods. So I think, making sure our green infrastructure is quality. That's one of the things that will attract good businesses. One of the other things that businesses are really interested in is diversity, and we're doing a poor job of that in Crozet. A lot of companies their employees themselves are very diverse. They may be people that work from all over the world, and they don't want to live in a town that's lily white.
Well said.
So, we need to be very inclusive. Do our best to make sure that we're inclusive of diversity within Crozet. That's good business.
This is a last question for you, and this is a crystal ball question for you. You grew up in Ivy. You live in Sugar Hollow. Albemarle County is in your blood. You're raising 2 daughters. When your daughters are your age now, what does Albemarle County look like? What's your prediction?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I almost don't even want to think about it.
And you can't be wrong here because no one can
I
see
can't
into
be
the
wrong.
future.
I mean,
I'm very fearful of what it's going to look like.
I'm very fearful as well. I'm a pragmatic optimist.
Same.
So I'm just going to say that we're going to get this right.
Okay.
This is a critical moment, and we understand with climate change and with affordable housing and a lot of these issues that we're facing that we know that now is the time to get it right, and we're going to get it right. So we're going to take measures to protect our rural area. We're going to take measures to provide for quality urban green space. We're going to take 29 North. We're going to strip off those extra lanes. We're going to provide a dedicated route for through traffic, and then the rest we're going to redevelop. We're going to provide. We're going to take our national bike route that goes through the Charlottesville, and we're going to make sure that it has bike lanes, whether it's in the rural area or the urban area, because it's an embarrassment that we don't have that yet. So we're going to be embarrassed, and we're going to fix that, right?
I think we're embarrassed now. Don't you?
I feel like we're embarrassed. I mean,
yeah.
So I think we're going to have a collaborative discussion with developers about how we can not massively sterilize the landscape, how we can build both density and also support ecology. I think we can start to integrate native plants into our development. We can start to, integrate, instead of burying streams, we'll realize that this out of sight, out of mind thing is a problem. We'll start to daylight more streams, bring them to surface, and integrate them into our developments as attractive water features. We'll make places that people actually want to live in. So that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say we're going to have.
So you're saying we're going to win?
We're going to win. We're going to win. That's what I'm going to. That's what I believe. I believe we're going to win. We're not there yet. There's a big difference between the pragmatists. But as a pragmatist, I'm going to work for those policies that help get us there. There are policy steps we can take to get there, and I think we as a community need to rally and fight tooth and nail to implement those policies and get us there.
Lonnie, you are a guy that gets me thinking about a lot of different stuff. You're a thought-provoking man. I'm grateful for your time. I'd love to invite you back to the show one time. I know your schedule's busy. Perhaps what we could do, we got 2 other mics here, 2 other chairs. Maybe the next time we do it, we do maybe like a 4-person roundtable. And maybe like the topic is the good, the bad, and the ugly of Albemarle County, Charlottesville, and Central Virginia. And for us to get to the point where we both want to get, which is better affordability, much more diversity, much more prioritization for green space, prioritization for ecology, prioritization for runners, walkers, and bikers, less car-centric. We got a lot of work to do. But to get to that point, we have to acknowledge the good, the bad, and the ugly of what we're doing. I'm grateful for your time.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was fun. Anything else you want to add?
I guess the only thing else I would add is just a plug, if that's okay. I worked with some volunteers to create a little book about Piedmont native plants. And I would encourage everyone out there to find one native plant that you love and plant it in your landscape. And find one invasive thing. If you're growing anything invasive, like maybe Nandina, find one thing that you can rip out and replace with the native plant.
Do you have a lot of plants at your yard?
I have a ton
of
plants in my yard. We have a carnivorous plant garden with orchids. We have a water garden full of native aquatic plants. We have.
What's your better half like?
Oh, my wife?
Yeah.
She, one of the little secrets is that people give me credit for my knowledge of botany and nature, but half of that knowledge is actually encased within my wife's brain. she's the one. She'll often correct me on things. So she's a lot less vocal than I am, but she's my best friend, and she's an invaluable co-partner in our explorations of nature. So.
Well said, dude.
Yeah.
That was so good. Lonnie Murray, you rocked this interview here. For those that want to know and that are asking here, you can catch the interview in totality up on the website on iloveseville.com. I would also encourage you to follow Lonnie on social. He expresses a lot of these thoughts on social media, and he does them very, very poignantly, very easy to understand. This is the I Love Seville show where we feature the best of Central Virginia, certainly the best of Charlottesville and Albemarle, but the best of Central Virginia. I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for joining us. Judah, I know we went a little long today, and I apologize, but I felt the interview with Lonnie was very compelling. And I enjoy conversations like this, Judah. I'm sorry. Tomorrow is Friday. We will be at the steps of Albemarle County Courthouse to see what happens with Fashion Scare Mall and whether or not Fashion Scare Mall, anything happens at all. Our prediction is nothing will happen, as the spider web that is the ownership of Fashion Scare Mall is completely tangled right now, and we need clarity before there's any developer or any deep-pocketed individual willing to put up their money, a REIT's money, a private equity firm's money to do something with this parcel. 16 acres on Route 29. I mean, you're talking one of the most key pieces of property. One of the conversations we had with Keith Smith, who's big into real estate, we put an over-under of 10 years for the new iteration of Fashion Scare Mall, and we both took the over, thinking that this is going to sit skeleton and derelict-like for 10 years, much like the Dewberry Hotel in the downtown mall has been an eyesore in our skyline in downtown Charlottesville. We will see you guys tomorrow at 10:15 for our real estate, zoning, and planning focused show called Real Talk with me and Keith Smith. You guys have a good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Take care. Dude, you were awesome. Seriously, that was fun. Did you have fun?
Yeah.
You know, it's 2:08 right now. The show usually goes to 1:30.